Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we wander the forgotten halls of Middle-earth and unearth the stories Tolkien left in shadow. Before we begin, take a moment to share in the comments where you are listening from, and whether this tale has found you in the quiet of dawn or the deep hours of night. There is a sound that haunts the edges of memory. It is the call of a horn, distant and broken, echoing across valleys where no living soul now dwells. It is the song of wind through empty halls, the whisper of pages turning in books that crumble to ash, even as they are read. It is the voice of Middle-earth itself, mourning those who walked its paths and vanished into the silence between ages. History, we are told, is written by the victors. Songs are sung by those who survive. The Red Book of Westmarch, that great chronicle of the War of the Ring, speaks of hobbits and kings, of wizards and elves whose deeds shook the foundations of the world. Yet even within its ink-stained pages, there are gaps, silences where names should be, shadows where light once burned. Tolkien himself knew this truth. In his letters, in the fragments of stories left unfinished, he hinted at a deeper legendarium, a tapestry woven not only from the threads of the mighty, but from the courage of the forgotten. These are not the heroes whose statues stand in the courts of Minas Tirith. They are not the names sung in the Hall of Fire. They did not ride with the Rohirrim at Pelennor Fields, nor stand with the Fellowship at the Black Gate. Yet without them, the world as we know it would never have come to be. Their choices rippled through time like stones cast into dark water, creating waves that reached shores they would never see. Imagine, if you will, a library hidden deep within the ruins of Rivendell. The last homely house has fallen silent now, its master sailed west, its gardens overgrown with memory and moss. But in a chamber sealed by spells and sorrow, there remain scrolls untouched by mortal hands. Upon these scrolls are written tales that even the wise have forgotten. Stories of defiance and love, of sacrifice made in shadow, of light kindled in places where darkness seemed eternal. Tonight, we unseal that chamber. Tonight, we read those scrolls by candlelight. As the wind howls through broken windows, and the stars wheel overhead in their ancient dance, we seek 5 souls who shaped the fate of Arda, and yet were erased by the turning of ages. 5 heroes whose valor burned as bright as any that history remembers, but whose names have been lost to the entropy of time. Why were they forgotten? Perhaps because their deeds were too painful to remember. Perhaps because they stood against powers that the chroniclers feared to name. Perhaps because they were simply too human, too flawed, too real for the golden hagiographies that kingdoms prefer. Or perhaps, and this is the most terrible truth, they were forgotten because forgetting is what time does best. It erases, it smooths, it turns mountains into sand and epics into whispers. But not all memories fade. Some linger in the bones of the earth, in the names of rivers, in the sudden chill that passes over your skin when you walk through a place where great things once occurred. Some memories refuse to die. They wait, patient as stone, for someone brave enough or foolish enough to dig them up and speak them aloud once more. You who listen now, you are that someone. You are the witness to what has been buried. And as you hear these names, these stories, something within you will recognize their truth. For the forgotten heroes of Middle-earth are not so different from us. They loved and feared. They chose wrongly and chose rightly. They fell, and some rose again. They are mirrors held up to our own souls, asking the eternal question that echoes through all of Tolkien's work. When the darkness comes, what will you do? The fire burns low. The night deepens. Somewhere in the distance, that horn sounds again. A call from beyond the circles of the world, from the place where memory and myth become one. It is time. The chronicle begins. The forgotten are about to speak. A soft whisper echoes through the chamber, and you cannot tell if it comes from the scrolls, from the wind, or from somewhere deeper still. Not all heroes are remembered, and not all memories fade. In the hidden city of Gondolin, ringed by mountains and veiled by the enchantments of Ulmo, there lived a princess who would not be caged. Her name was Aradel, which means the noble elf, but she was called by another name as well, Finiel, the White Lady of the Noldor. Her beauty was a legend even in a city of legends, her hair dark as midnight, her skin pale as starlight on snow, her eyes fierce as hunting hawks. She was the sister of Turgon, the king who built Gondolin as a refuge from the darkness of Morgoth, and she was beloved by all who knew her. Yet there was a wildness in Aredal that no city walls could contain. Gondolin was perfection. Its towers gleamed like drawn swords against the sky. Its fountains sang with water drawn from secret springs. Its people were safe, shielded from the wars that ravaged Beleriand beyond the encircling mountains. But safety can become its own prison. And for Aredal, who had ridden with the hunting parties of Valinor, who had known the freedom of the wide world before the first sunrise, Gondolin was a cage made of silver and song. She begged her brother to let her leave. Not forever, just for a time. She longed to see her kin again, the sons of Efdi Anor who dwelt in the forests and hills of East Beleriand. She missed the open sky, the endless horizons, the thrill of riding through lands where danger and beauty walked hand in hand. Turgon, who loved his sister dearly, resisted at first. He knew the perils beyond the mountains. He knew that Morgoth spies were everywhere, that the servants of darkness hunted the Noldor without mercy. But Aredal's will was as strong as his own, and at last, his love proved greater than his fear. He let her go. It was a decision he would regret until the ending of the world. Aredal rode out from Gondolin with an escort of hardy warriors, the sunlight gleaming on their armor, hope bright in their hearts. They crossed the mountains and descended into the forests of Regen, seeking the sons of Efdi Anor. But the woods were deep and tangled, older than the awakening of elves, and there were powers there that did not love the light. Aredal and her companions became separated. The warriors searched desperately, calling her name into the green shadows. But she was gone, vanished as if the forest itself had swallowed her whole. She wandered alone now, and the forest seemed to shift around her, paths closing behind her, new trails opening before her. She did not know, could not know, that she was being herded, guided by a will both subtle and cruel. Deeper and deeper into Nan Elmoth she went, that ancient wood where the stars could not penetrate the canopy, where twilight reigned eternal. It was the domain of Eel, called the Dark Elf, a smith of terrible skill and darker temperament. He had renounced the summons of the Valar long ago, choosing instead the shadows and silence of Middle-earth. He desired no company save his own, no light save that of his forge. But when he saw Aridel, lost and alone in his realm, desire kindled in his heart, a desire that was possessive and consuming. Eel used his arts to enchant her, to cloud her mind and dull her will. Whether this was outright sorcery, or simply the slow corrosion of isolation and manipulation, Tolkien leaves ambiguous. What is certain is that Aridel became his wife, not through love, but through entrapment. She bore him a son, Maeglin, whose name means sharp glance, and for long years she dwelt in the darkness of Nan Elmoth, far from the light of Gondolin, far from the freedom she had sought. But the spirit of Aradel could not be wholly quenched. Motherhood gave her new purpose, and as Maeglin grew, she began to tell him stories of the hidden city, of his uncle Targan, of towers that touched the sky and fountains that sang. She planted in her son's heart a longing for something beyond the endless shadows of his father's realm. And when Eel was away, traveling to the dwarf cities on some dark errand, Aridel seized her chance. She fled with Maeglin, racing through the forest like a deer pursued by wolves, seeking the mountains, seeking home. They reached Gondolin. Turgon welcomed his sister with tears of joy and embraced his nephew with hope. It seemed, for a moment, that the story might have a happy ending. But Eel had discovered their flight, and his rage was terrible. He followed them through secret ways, evading the watch of the guards, and stood at last in the throne room of Gondolin itself, demanding the return of his wife and son. Turgon refused. He offered Eel a choice: remain in Gondolin and live in peace, or depart alone into exile. Eel chose neither. In his fury and pride, he cast a poisoned javelin at Maeglin, seeking to murder his own son rather than lose him. But Aridel, with the instinct of a mother and the courage of the Noldor, threw herself in front of the spear. The poison worked quickly. Even the healers of Gondolin, with all their art, could not save her. As she lay dying, Aridel looked upon her son one last time, and perhaps she saw in his eyes the shadow that would one day betray the city she had fought so hard to return to. Or perhaps she saw only love and hope and the freedom she had always sought, now slipping away like water through her fingers. Her voice fades as her blood stains the white stone of Gondolin, and her son Maeglin is born in shadow. Aredel's story is often overshadowed by the greater tragedies of the First Age, yet it contains all the themes that Tolkien held most dear: the price of freedom, the prison of safety, the courage to defy, even when defiance leads to doom. She was not a warrior who slew dragons or a queen who ruled nations. She was a woman who wanted to choose her own path, and that choice, that simple, human, heartbreaking choice, set in motion the fall of Gondolin itself. For Maeglin, raised in darkness and obsessed with his cousin Edril, would one day betray the city's location to Morgoth, and the towers would burn, and the fountains would run red. Yet none of this diminishes Aredel's heroism. She fought for agency in a world that sought to control her. She escaped captivity, not once but twice. First from the overprotection of her brother, then from the domination of her husband. She loved her son enough to die for him. And in the end, her legacy is not the betrayal that came after, but the choice that came before. The choice to be free, no matter the cost. In the ruins of Gondolin, if you listen closely, you can still hear her laughter on the wind. The laugh of a woman who rode like lightning and feared nothing, not even the darkness. History may have forgotten her name, but the mountains remember, and so do we. Strength is measured in many ways. The strength to wield a sword, the strength to endure pain, the strength to love when all hope is lost. But there is another kind of strength, rarer and more terrible, the strength to defy a god. This is the strength of H2 Thalion, called the Steadfast, the mightiest warrior of mortal men in the elder days, and the only man to stand before Morgoth himself and spit defiance in the Dark Lord's face. The Nernaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, was the most catastrophic defeat the Free Peoples ever suffered. It was meant to be the great offensive, the final strike against Morgoth that would break his power forever. Elves and men marched together in vast array, their banners bright, their hope brighter still. But they were betrayed. The armies of Morgoth, hidden and held in reserve, fell upon them like a hammer on an anvil. The field became a slaughter. Kings fell, heroes died. The armies of light broke and fled. But Eishturin did not flee. He commanded the rear guard. A desperate band of warriors tasked with holding the pass so that Turgon and the remnant of the Gondolindrim could escape to their hidden city. Hadrin and his brother Hur stood with their men. Edain, mortal men of the house of Hadar, against the endless tide of orcs, trolls, and balrogs that poured from Angband. They fought not for victory, which was impossible, but for time. Every moment they held was another moment for their allies to reach safety. Every orc that fell was one less to pursue the fleeing survivors. The battle was apocalyptic. Hrin's axe rose and fell like the rhythm of doom itself. 70 times he slew, and 70 orcs died upon his blade. His voice rang out above the carnage, a wordless roar of defiance that struck terror into the hearts of Morgoth's servants. Beside him, Hor fell, pierced by a poisoned arrow, but even in death he prophesied, "From you and from me a new star shall arise." It was a promise that would not be fulfilled for generations, in the form of Eärendil, the mariner who would bear the Silmaril to Valinor and change the fate of the world. But Eishturin fought on. Alone now, surrounded by a mountain of corpses, he stood defiant. The orcs no longer dared approach him. They fell back, and instead the command came from Angband itself, "Take him alive." Morgoth wanted this one. Morgoth, who had fought the Valar in the First War, who had shattered mountains and poisoned stars, desired above all things to break the will of this mortal man. They came at him with nets and chains, with sorcery and overwhelming numbers. At last, buried beneath a tide of foes, Eishturin was captured. Weaponless, bloodied, unbowed, he was dragged before the Iron Throne in the depths of Angband, into the presence of Morgoth, the Black Four of the world. Imagine that moment. The greatest of the Aina, the most powerful being to walk Middle-earth since the creation of the world, seated upon a throne of black iron, his crown 3 vast peaks of steel, his eyes like pits of flame. Before him, a mortal man, finite and small, whose life is but a flicker of light in the endless darkness of time. Morgoth demanded that Eishturin reveal the location of Gondolin. Hrin refused. Morgoth offered rewards beyond measure: kingship over all men, knowledge of hidden things, power to rival the Elder. Eishturin refused. Morgoth threatened torture, death, the ruin of all Eärendil held dear. Hrin laughed, and in that laugh was all the defiance of the Edain, all the courage of free will, all the glory of mortality set against immortal tyranny. Rin spat in Morgoth's face. A symbolic act. Perhaps, but one that carried the weight of absolute rejection. He would not bend. He would not break. Morgoth, in his pride, could not comprehend it. How could a creature so weak, so temporary, so insignificant, resist the Lord of the earth? So Morgoth chose a punishment worse than death. He set Rin upon the peak of Thangorodrim, the 3 volcanic mountains that crowned Angband, and bound him to a chair of stone with the power of his will. There Rin would sit, unable to move, unable to die, for 28 years. And Morgoth laid a curse upon him. He would see with Morgoth's eyes. Every moment of his children's lives would be visible to him. Every choice, every sorrow, every step toward doom. And he would be powerless to intervene, unable even to cry out or turn away. It was a curse designed to break him utterly, to prove that love itself is weakness, to demonstrate that defiance has no reward save deeper suffering. And so Rin watched. He watched as his son Rin grew to manhood, proud and fierce, and haunted by the shadow of Morgoth's curse. He watched as Rin was driven by pride and fate into terrible mistakes, killing his friend, loving his sister unknowing, bringing ruin to all who sheltered him. He watched as his daughter Nienna was caught in a web of enchantment and despair, wedding her own brother in tragic ignorance. He watched as the dragon Glaurung spoke lies and truths in equal measure, poisoning minds and hearts. He watched as Rin, discovering the horror of what he had done, threw himself upon his black sword. He watched as Nienna cast herself from a cliff into the raging waters below. The curse of Morgoth consumed his entire family, not through Morgoth's direct action. The Dark Lord was too cunning for that. No, the curse worked through the choices of the cursed, through pride and shame and the terrible weight of fate pressing down on free will until it buckled and snapped. Rin saw it all, every scream, every tear, every moment of hope extinguished, and he could do nothing, yet even this did not break him. When Morgoth finally released him, thinking to see a broken shell of a man, Rin stood upright. His body was withered, his hair white, his eyes hollowed by grief beyond words, but his spirit remained unbroken. He spat defiance one last time. "You have not conquered." And he walked out of Angband, while Morgoth's laughter echoed behind him. Laughter that masked the Dark Lord's rage. For Rin had proven something Morgoth could not accept, that even in total defeat, even stripped of everything, a free being can choose not to surrender. Ren's final years were tragic. He became a wanderer, a ghost haunting the lands where his children had died. He recovered the Naglamma, the necklace of the dwarves, from the ruins of Nargothrond, and brought it to Thingol in Doriath, a gift laced with bitter irony and hidden doom. The jealousy and greed that necklace inspired would lead to the ruin of Doriath itself, another ripple of Morgoth's curse spreading through time. At last, broken in body but not in will, Rin cast himself into the sea, seeking the peace of death that had been denied him for so long. The world remembers Rin Turambar, the dragon slayer, the tragic hero whose story is told in The Children of Rin. But Rin's story is possible only because Rin endured. Rin is the foundation upon which that tragedy is built. He is the man who bore the unbearable, who loved when love brought only pain, who defied when defiance seemed madness. Tolkien rarely spoke of H-to-Rin in his published works. Yet in the Silmarillion and the fragmentary tales, H-Rin is the archetype of human nobility. He is Job without consolation, Prometheus without rescue. He is the man who proves that Morgoth, for all his power, cannot own the soul of one who refuses to yield it. In that refusal is the seed of Morgoth's defeat, though it would take ages to bloom. The wind carries Rin's last words across the battlefields of Beleriand, across the drowned lands, across the centuries. The shadow shall not have dominion forever. And he was right. In the end, Morgoth fell. But H-to-Rin paid the price for that victory long before it came. He is the forgotten titan, the enduring witness, the man who stared into the abyss and did not blink. His name deserves to be carved in stone and sung in halls. Instead, it is whispered by the wind, known only to those who listen closely enough to hear the echoes of an older, darker, more terrible age. Not all heroes wield legendary swords. Not all who save the world stand upon battlefields where history watches. Some heroism is quiet. Some courage is found in the simple act of doing what is right when every law, every oath, every authority commands you to do otherwise. This is the heroism of Beregond, a soldier of the guard of the citadel in Minas Tirith, a man whose name appears only briefly in The Lord of the Rings, yet whose actions changed the fate of Gondor itself. Beregond was not remarkable. He was a man of middling rank, a father, a soldier who had served faithfully for years. His life was defined by duty and discipline. He loved his city, his captain Faramir, and the order that gave meaning to his days. But when the darkness came, when Sauron's shadow fell across the Pelennor fields, and despair settled over Minas Tirith, like a shroud, Beregond faced a choice that no soldier should ever have to face: obey the law, or save a life. Denethor, the steward of Gondor, was a man of immense will and tragic pride. He had used the Palantir, the Seeing Stone, to spy upon Sauron's forces, believing his wisdom was strong enough to withstand the Dark Lord's influence. He was wrong. Slowly, subtly, Sauron poisoned his mind with half-truths and visions of inevitable defeat. When Faramir, Denethor's beloved son, was brought back from the disastrous retreat at Osgiliath, wounded, fevered, near death, Denethor looked upon him with the eyes of madness. He saw not a son who might yet be healed, but a corpse, a symbol of failure, the end of his line. And in his madness, Denethor decided that if his line must end, it would end in fire rather than in the humiliation of Sauron's victory. He would burn himself upon a funeral pyre, and he would take Faramir with him. The law was clear, the steward's word was absolute. His authority within Minas Tirith was second only to the king, and there was no king. When Denethor commanded that Faramir be carried to the tombs of his ancestors, that oil and wood be laid for burning, no one dared question him. The madness was evident to some, but who could defy the steward? Who would dare break their oath of service, violate the sanctity of the Hallows, commit treason in the midst of a siege? Beregond dared. He had served under Faramir. He had seen the captain's mercy, his wisdom, his courage. He had witnessed Faramir treat the common soldiers not as tools, but as men worthy of respect. And when Pippin, the young hobbit, came running to Beregond in desperation, begging him to help stop Denethor's madness, Beregond made his choice. He would break his oath. He would abandon his post. He would commit acts that the law called treasonous, and the people would call sacrilege. But he would save Faramir. He ran to the Hallows, the sacred tombs of the stewards, where no guard was permitted to bear arms. He was armed. He was forbidden to enter. He entered anyway. The servants of Denethor, loyal to the last, tried to stop him. Beregond, a man who had lived his entire life by the code of the soldier, drew his sword against his own countrymen. Blood was shed on sacred ground. Men died by his hand, not enemies, but fellow Gondorians. Men who believed they were serving their duty, just as he had once believed. The doors of the House of the Dead were barred. Beregond hacked through them. Inside, the pyre was already kindled, flames beginning to lick at the wood. Denethor stood robed in white, clutching the unconscious Faramir, ready to cast them both into the fire. And then Gandalf arrived, summoned by Pippin, arriving just in time to save Faramir from the flames. Denethor, in his final act of defiance, threw himself into the fire, the palantir burning in his hands, his will unbroken even as his body was consumed. Faramir lived, and Gondor, which would have been leaderless in its darkest hour, had a steward to guide it when the king returned. The siege was broken, the war was won, but the cost to Beregond was immense. He had violated every oath he had ever sworn. He had shed blood in the Hallows. He had struck down his own comrades. Under the ancient law of Gondor, the penalty for such deeds was death. When Aragorn returned as king, when order was restored and justice had to be rendered, Beregond stood before the throne expecting execution. He made no excuses. He did not plead for mercy. He had done what he knew to be right, and he was prepared to pay the price. Aragorn, newly crowned King Elessar, looked upon this soldier with the wisdom of one who had walked many roads and seen many faces of courage. He pronounced judgment Beregond was guilty of breaking the law. The penalty could not be ignored, but mercy could temper justice. Beregond would be exiled from Minas Tirith, stripped of his rank in the Citadel Guard. Yet this exile would not be punishment without purpose. He would be made the captain of the Guard of Faramir, Prince of Ithilien, and would serve in the green lands east of the Anduin, protecting the very man he had saved. It was a sentence that acknowledged both the crime and the nobility behind it. Beregond had broken the law, but he had upheld a higher law, the law of compassion, of mercy, of choosing life over blind obedience. Tolkien, who fought in the trenches of World War I, and witnessed the horror of men following orders without question, understood the terrible necessity of such choices. Beregond is his answer to the question, what does it mean to be good when goodness requires you to be disobedient? Beregond's story is easily overlooked in the vast sweep of The Lord of the Rings. He is not a member of the Fellowship. He does not fight at the Black Gate. His name does not appear in songs. Yet without him, Faramir would have died, and with Faramir dead, who would have ruled Gondor in the days after the war? Who would have wed Eowyn and brought healing to two broken realms? The fate of nations turned on the choice of a single guard who loved mercy more than law. This is the beauty and terror of Tolkien's world. The smallest choices have the greatest consequences. The quiet acts of unknown soldiers can change history as surely as the deeds of kings. Beregond did not have the strength of Eishtu-Rin or the beauty of Eredil. He had only his conscience and his courage, and that was enough. As the flames die in the house of the dead, as Gandalf carries Faramir to the houses of healing, Beregond stands alone in the shadowed hall, blood on his sword, tears on his face. He looks toward the east, where the shadow still rises, where the war is not yet won. And he knows, with the certainty of the condemned, that he would make the same choice again. Every time, without hesitation, because heroism in the end is not about glory. It is about the willingness to lose everything for the sake of what is right. And that is a lesson the world forgot about Beregond, but one we desperately need to remember. There are some in Middle-earth who defy death itself, not through dark sorcery or cursed immortality, but through the grace of powers beyond the circles of the world. Glorfindel is one such being, an elf, lord who died in battle during the First Age, passed beyond the veil into the halls of Mandos, and was sent back to Middle-earth clothed in new flesh, bearing a second chance to stand against the darkness. His story is fragmented, scattered across Tolkien's writings like light through broken glass, yet in those fragments is a tale of redemption, sacrifice, and the persistence of hope against impossible odds. In the First Age, Gondolin stood as the last great stronghold of the elves, a hidden city of white towers and singing fountains, protected by mountains and the will of Ulmo, Lord of Waters. Glorfindel was one of its greatest lords, golden-haired and valiant, captain of the House of the Golden Flower. His people were warriors and poets, both, and Glorfindel himself was counted among the mightiest of the Noldor who dwelt in Middle-earth. He had seen the light of the two trees in Valinor before their destruction. He had crossed the grinding ice in the terrible flight of the Noldor. He had fought in battles whose names are lost to time, but no fortress, no matter how well hidden, can stand forever. Maeglin, the son of Aredal, betrayed Gondolin's location to Morgoth, and the armies of darkness came in the night. Dragons and Balrogs, orcs beyond counting, fell upon the city in a storm of fire and ruin. The siege was apocalyptic. Turgon the king commanded the evacuation of the survivors, women, children, the wounded, to flee through secret passages while the warriors held the gates. It was a desperate retreat through the high passes of the encircling mountains, pursued by enemies and fire. In one of those passes, at a place called Cirith Thoronath, the Eagle's Cleft, the refugees were overtaken. A Balrog, a demon of flame and shadow, creature of the ancient world, blocked the path. Its whip cracked like thunder. Its sword burned with the heat of the earth's core. Behind it, the pass was crumbling, the very stones melting in the heat of Gondolin's burning. There was no escape. The survivors would die here, cut off from safety, consumed by the same darkness that had devoured their city. Glorfindel stepped forward. He was exhausted. His armor was dented and blackened. His sword had already tasted the blood of 100 foes. But he did not hesitate. He challenged the Balrog, and the two fought upon the narrow precipice, fire and lightning clashing, the mountainside shaking with the force of their blows. The duel was titanic. Elf, lord against demon, light against darkness, skill against brute power. Glorfindel's blade found its mark again and again, but the Balrog was a creature of Morgoth's making, nearly indestructible, fueled by malice and ancient wrath. At last, with a final, desperate strike, Glorfindel drove his sword into the Balrog's heart. The demon screamed, a sound that shattered stone and split the sky. But even in death, it sought vengeance. Its whip lashed out, coiling around Glorfindel's leg, and as the Balrog fell from the cliff into the abyss below, it dragged Glorfindel with it. They fell together, locked in mutual destruction, tumbling down the mountainside into the darkness. The Balrog was destroyed utterly. Glorfindel's broken body was found later by the refugees, retrieved with reverence and sorrow. They raised a cairn of stones over him. There on the mountainside, and even the orcs feared to approach that place afterward. For it was said that green grass grew upon the mound in defiance of the desolation around it. Glorfindel was dead. His spirit passed to the halls of Mandos, the place of judgment and waiting, where the souls of elves go when they are slain. And there, his story might have ended. Many great elves have died and remained in those halls, waiting for the ending of the world. But Glorfindel was not kept there. Mandos, the doomsman of the Valar, judged him and found his sacrifice worthy of reward. Glorfindel had given his life not for glory or revenge, but to save others. Innocents, refugees, those who could not defend themselves. His death was an act of pure selflessness. And so, after long ages, by the grace of the Valar and the will of Mand, Glorfindel was released from the halls of Mandos and reborn. Not as a shade or a spirit, but as a living elf, clothed again in flesh, granted a second life in Middle-earth. This was a gift almost unheard of. The laws of mortality and death are deep, woven into the fabric of Arda. Even the Valar rarely intervene to undo death, for to do so is to tamper with the music of the Aina itself, the great song that shaped the world. Yet for Glorfindel, an exception was made. He was returned, not to live quietly in Valinor, but to go back to Middle-earth and stand once more against the shadow. The exact timing of his return is debated by scholars of the lore. But what is clear is that Glorfindel reappeared in the Second or early Third Age, sent by the Valar to aid in the defense of the free peoples. He dwelt in Rivendell, in the House of Elrond, and though he bore the same name and wore the same golden hair, he was changed. There was a light about him now, a radiance that spoke of one who had walked beyond death and returned. He was more than an elf lord. He was a sign, a promise that the Valar had not abandoned Middle-earth, that mercy and grace still flowed from the undying lands, that even in the darkest hours, hope could be rekindled. When the Witch, King of Angmar, rose to power in the north, threatening the remnants of the Ditu Nidain, it was Glorfindel who rode to battle against him. At the Battle of Fornost, Glorfindel pursued the fleeing witch, king, and when the Lord of the Nazgul turned to face him, Glorfindel spoke a prophecy. "Do not pursue him. He will not return to this land. Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man shall he fall." It was a prophecy that would be fulfilled 1,000 years later on the Pelennor fields. When Eowyn and Merry struck down the witch, king, and broke the power of Angmar forever, Glorfindel appears again in The Lord of the Rings, though his role is small. He is one of the lords of Rivendell, who ride out to escort Frodo and his companions to safety when they are pursued by the Nazgul. It is Glorfindel who lends Frodo his horse, Asfaloth, and it is Glorfindel whose power helps hold the ford against the 9 riders, allowing Frodo to reach the safety of Rivendell. In the films, this role was given to Arwen, but in the books, it is Glorfindel, the elf who died fighting a Balrog. who stands against the servants of Sauron with calm, unshakable authority. There is a quiet beauty in Glorfindel's story. He is not driven by vengeance or ambition. He does not seek glory or recognition. He is simply there, at the moments when he is needed most, a guardian in the shadows, a warrior who has already given his life once and is willing to give it again if necessary. His very existence is a rebuke to despair. He is proof that death is not the end, that sacrifice is not futile, that the Valar remember and reward those who act with courage and love. Tolkien himself seemed uncertain at times whether the Glorfindel of the First Age and the Glorfindel of the Third Age were the same person. But later writings confirm it. They are one and the same, the elf who died and returned, the twice-born warrior. His story is incomplete, fragmentary, scattered across essays and appendices. Yet perhaps that incompleteness is fitting. Glorfindel does not need a great epic to justify his existence. His deeds speak for themselves. He fell, and he rose. He died, and he lived. He is the embodiment of resurrection, of grace given freely, of light that cannot be extinguished. The light of Glorfindel fades into the horizon as the Third Age draws to a close, as the elves prepare to leave Middle-earth forever and sail into the west. But a whisper lingers in the halls of Rivendell, in the mountain passes where he once fought, in the memories of those who saw him ride. Not all who fall are lost. He is the forgotten angel of Middle-earth, the guardian whose name is known but whose story is rarely told. Yet in that silence is a deeper truth, that the greatest heroism is often the quietest, the most selfless, the least celebrated. Glorfindel did not seek to be remembered. He sought only to serve. And in serving, he became something greater than a hero. He became a sign of hope itself. There are tragedies written in blood and fire, and there are tragedies written in silence and slow erosion. The doom of Nen Menor is remembered as a cataclysm. An island drowned beneath the waves, a civilization swallowed by wrath and pride. But long before the ships of the king sailed to make war upon the undying lands, long before Sauron whispered poison into the ears of Ar, Pharazôn, the seeds of Nen Menor's fall were planted in a quieter place, in the heart of a woman named Erendis, the White Lady of Emmerich, whose love turned to bitterness, and whose sorrow became a mirror for her nation's decay. Her story is buried deep in Tolkien's unfinished Talus, a fragment of a longer narrative called Aldarion and Erendis, the Mariner's Wife. It is not an epic of swords and sorcery. It is a domestic tragedy, intimate and painful, about the slow destruction of a marriage and the price of ambition and neglect. Yet in its themes, it echoes the larger tragedy of Nant Menor, itself the tension between the sea and the land, between reaching for greatness and cherishing what is already held, between power and love. Erendis was a woman of the House of the Edain, descended from Begates or the Old, whose people had been the first of men to befriend the elves in the First Age. She was beautiful, wise, and fierce. She loved the green lands of Nen Menor, the forests and hills, the quiet places where the wind sang through the leaves. She was not drawn to the sea, as so many Ned Menrians were. The sea to her was cold and treacherous, a thief that stole away the people she loved and returned them changed, or not at all. She married Aldarion, who would become the sixth king of Nant Menor, a man obsessed with the sea and with the distant lands of Middle-earth. Aldarion was a mariner, a shipwright, a visionary who dreamed of building an alliance between Nentmena and the elves, of establishing ports and havens along the coasts of Middle-earth to stand against the growing shadow of Sauron. His ambition was noble. His work was vital, but it consumed him. He was gone for years at a time, sailing the wide ocean, leaving Arendis alone to manage their estates, to raise their daughter Ancalim, to endure the loneliness of being the wife of a man who loved the sea more than he loved her. At first, Arendis tried to be patient. She understood duty. She understood the importance of his work. But patience has its limits, and loneliness is a poison that works slowly. She grew bitter. She withdrew her love, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. If she did not love him, then his absence could not hurt her. She taught her daughter to distrust men, to see them as unreliable, to value independence above all else. She turned the green lands into a fortress of solitude, surrounding herself with women, forbidding the presence of men in her household, except when absolutely necessary. When Aldarion returned from his voyages, he found not the warm, welcoming home he remembered, but a cold and hostile place. Arendis no longer greeted him with joy. She met him with accusations and silence. Their marriage became a battleground of unspoken resentments and wounded pride. Aldarion, hurt and confused, retreated further into his work. Arendis, hurt and abandoned, hardened her heart further. The cycle fed itself, a spiral of misery that neither could escape. Their daughter, Ancalim, grew up in this poisoned atmosphere. She became the first ruling queen of Nentmena. But her reign was marked by the same bitterness and distrust that had defined her mother's life. She married out of political necessity, not love, and refused to give her husband power or affection. The scars of Arendis's broken heart were passed down, wounding the next generation, weakening the bonds that held the realm together. Arendis herself vanished in the later years of her life. She left her home and was never seen again. Some said she walked into the sea, seeking in death the reunion with her husband that she had been denied in life. Others said she simply wandered into the wild lands and was lost. Tolkien leaves her fate deliberately ambiguous, but the image is haunting a woman, swallowed by the very thing she feared and hated. Her story ending not with a dramatic finale, but with a quiet, unresolved disappearance. The tragedy of Arendis is the tragedy of Nentmena Ritsmore. The Nenti men, Rians, were blessed beyond all other men, given long life, great wisdom, a beautiful island, the friendship of the elves. But they grew discontent. They reached for more. They envied the immortality of the elves. They feared death, which the Valar had given them as a gift, and saw it instead as a curse. Their love of the sea, once a source of joy and connection, became an obsession with reaching the undying lands, with claiming immortality by force. And in the end, their pride and their fear led them to their doom. The island was destroyed. The seas swallowed it whole, and only a remnant survived, exiled and diminished, to begin again in Middle-earth. Arendis's love of the land and her distrust of the sea mirror Nentmena's forgotten wisdom. She knew instinctively that there is danger in always reaching for what is beyond, in never being content with what you have. But she was unable to balance that wisdom with grace or compassion. Her fear of loss became a self-fulfilling prophecy. By refusing to love for fear of being hurt, she ensured that love could never heal her. Tolkien wrote this story not as an adventure, but as a reflection on the nature of love and sacrifice, on the cost of ambition, on the ways that pride and fear can corrode even the most beautiful things. Erendis is not a villain. She is a victim of circumstance and of her own wounded heart. But her inability to forgive, to adapt, to reach out across the gulf of misunderstanding, contributed to the slow decay of her family and, symbolically, her nation. Her story is forgotten because it is uncomfortable. It does not fit the mold of heroic fantasy. There are no dragons to slay, no dark lords to defeat. There is only the slow, painful erosion of human connection. The quiet tragedy of two people who loved each other, and yet could not bridge the distance between them. But that makes it no less important. The fall of Nen Menna was not caused by Sauron alone. It was caused by the choices of the Nenta men, Rians themselves. Their pride, their fear, their inability to be content with the gifts they had been given. Erendis embodies all of this. She is the warning unheeded, the wisdom ignored, the voice crying out in the wilderness that no one wanted to hear. And in the end, she is lost, swallowed by silence. Her name known only to scholars who dig through dusty fragments of unfinished tales. Her last words echo across the sea, faint as the cry of gulls. Let Nen Menna remember me, though I am lost to its waves. And Nen Menna did not remember. The island sank, and with it, the memory of the woman who saw its doom before anyone else. But we can remember. We can look back across the drowned years and see her standing on the shore, her hair whipped by the wind, her eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a ship that will never return. And in her sorrow, we can see the reflection of all the forgotten griefs that empires bury beneath their grandeur. She deserved better. Nenta Menna deserved better. But fate and pride are cruel teachers, and the lessons they teach are written in salt water and regret. The candles burn low. The scroll is nearly at its end. Outside, the wind moves through the ruins of Rivendell, stirring leaves and memories in equal measure. We have walked through shadow and fire, through love and loss, through ages that have crumbled into dust. We have spoken the names of 5 souls who changed the world and were forgotten by it. Now, at the close of this chronicle, it is time to ask, what binds these heroes together? What thread runs through their disparate stories, connecting the White Lady of Gondolin to the soldier of Minas Tirith, the steadfast warrior of Dor Lamin to the twice-born elf of Rivendell, the bitter queen of Nen Menna to the others? The answer is simple and terrible. They chose truth over comfort. Aridel chose freedom, knowing it would lead her into darkness. Shrin chose defiance, knowing it would bring only suffering. Beregond chose mercy, knowing it would cost him everything. Glorfindel chose sacrifice, knowing he might never return. Erendis chose honesty, even when it poisoned her own heart. They were not perfect. They made mistakes. Some of their choices led to ruin or set in motion tragedies that echoed through generations. But they were real. They were human, or as human as elves and the Edain could be. They loved, they feared, they struggled, they failed. And in their imperfection, they reflect something essential about Tolkien's vision of heroism. The great narratives of Middle-earth often focus on the chosen ones, the ring-bearers, the kings, the wizards. These are the figures of destiny, the ones whose actions are woven into the fabric of fate itself. But Tolkien knew that history is not made by destiny alone. It is made by the choices of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. It is made by the guard who disobeys orders, the princess who flees captivity, the man who will not bow, the elf who gives his life for strangers, the queen who loves too deeply and cannot let go. These are the forgotten heroes, because they do not fit the mold of legend. Legends prefer simplicity, the hero is brave, the villain is evil, the ending is triumphant. But the stories of the forgotten are complicated. They are messy. They ask uncomfortable questions. Was Eredil foolish to leave Gondolin? Was Eocharin wrong to defy Morgoth, knowing his family would suffer? Was Beregond a traitor or a savior? Was Glorfindel's return a gift or a burden? Was Erendis a victim or an architect of her own misery? The answers are not simple, and that is precisely why these stories matter. Imagine a Middle-earth without them. Imagine Gondolin standing unopposed, Eredil never leaving, never meeting Eel, never giving birth to Maeglin. Without Maeglin's betrayal, the city does not fall, not in the way it did, at least. But does it stand forever? Or does it become a tomb, beautiful and sterile, cut off from the world until it withers from within? Eredil's choice, tragic as it was, ensured that Gondolin was part of the living world, with all the risks and consequences that entails. Imagine Eocharin bending the knee to Morgoth, revealing Gondolin's location, trading his freedom for his family's safety. Turgon falls. The hidden city is destroyed a generation earlier. The line of Eärendil is never born. The Silmaril never reaches Valinor. The Valar never come to overthrow Morgoth. The world remains in darkness forever. Eocharin's suffering, unbearable as it was, held the line. His defiance mattered. Imagine Beregond obeying orders, standing aside as Faramir burns. Gondor loses its steward in the hour of its greatest need. When Aragorn returns, there is no one to greet him. No bridge between the old order and the new. The restoration is bloodier, slower, more fractured. Beregond's disobedience saved more than one life. It saved the continuity of a nation. Imagine Glorfindel remaining in the halls of Mandos, his sacrifice honored but unrewarded. Who, then, stands against the witch, king at Fornost? Who speaks the prophecy that sustains hope through the long darkness? Who rides to Frodo's aid when the Nazgul close in? The story continues, perhaps, but it is colder, darker, less touched by grace. Imagine Erendis swallowing her bitterness, pretending to be content, teaching her daughter to smile and obey. Ankalim grows up passive, compliant, a queen who does not challenge the growing corruption of Nent Mena. The slide towards Sauron's influence accelerates. The island falls sooner, or in a different way, and the lessons that should have been learned are obscured. Erendis's pain. Her refusal to be silent, her insistence on acknowledging the truth of her suffering, became a warning that future generations ignored, but a warning nonetheless. The forgotten heroes are the scaffolding upon which the great events of Middle-earth were built. They are the foundation stones, hidden beneath the earth, unseen but essential. Without them, the towers fall. Without them, the stories we know and love do not exist. Yet their names are whispered, if they are spoken at all. They are footnotes. They are fragments. They are the ghosts in the margins of the Red Book. But they are not gone. Not truly. Because we remember them now. We have unearthed their stories from the ruins. We have lit candles in the darkness and read their names aloud. And in speaking them, we give them a kind of immortality that even the elves might envy. Memory is the only true defiance of time. The body fades, the works crumble, even mountains are worn down by wind and rain. But a story once told echoes forever. There is a reason these stories resonate. In a world that celebrates the extraordinary, they remind us that ordinary courage matters. In a culture that worships victory, they remind us that some defeats are more noble than any triumph. In an age that demands heroes without flaws, they remind us that flaws are what make heroism possible. It is easy to be brave when you have no fear. It is easy to be kind when it costs you nothing. It is easy to do the right thing when the right thing is also the easy thing. But Aredal, Eitrin, Berigund, Glorfindel, and Arendis faced impossible choices. They acted in the face of fear, loss, despair, and ambiguity. And that is what makes them heroes. Tolkien understood this. He fought in the trenches of the Somme. He watched friends die for causes that seemed, in the moment, incomprehensible. He knew that war is not glorious, that heroism is not clean, that the most important choices are often made by people whose names will never be remembered. He wrote his legendarium not to escape from that reality, but to explore it, to ask what it means to act rightly in a world that is broken, to love in the face of loss, to hope when hope seems foolish. The forgotten heroes are his answer. They are the proof that even in the darkest ages, even in the moments of greatest despair, there are those who will stand and say, "No, not here, not today, not while I still draw breath." And their stand matters. It matters because they chose to make it. It matters because their courage, however small it seemed in the moment, rippled outward through time and space, shaping the world in ways they could never have imagined. It matters because we remember them, and in remembering, we carry them forward. They are not dead. They are not lost. They are here, in this telling, in your hearing, in the space between the words where meaning lives. The music fades now. The scroll ends. The candles gutter and go dark. But somewhere, in the deep places of the world, in the hidden corners where memory endures, a song is still being sung. It is the song of the forgotten, the unsung, the unnamed. It is the song of those who gave everything and received nothing. It is the song of the five whose stories you have heard tonight, and it will not end. Not while there are those who listen. Not while there are voices willing to speak the names of the lost. Not while there is light, however faint, to push back the dark. A single line appears, etched in the air like fire, lingering for a moment before it fades. In the end, even forgotten light leaves a mark upon the dark. And it does. It always does. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.